Welcome to Life Stories. What would you do if the one thing that anchored you in this world, your home, was taken away? Not by a stranger, not by an outsider, but by your own family. Imagine waking up one morning to find the locks changed, the doors shut, and your childhood memories slipping through your fingers. This isn't just about property. It's about trust, betrayal, and the price of standing up for what's yours. For Ethan, his mother's house wasn't just a roof over his head, it was a part of his very soul. But when his father and stepmother decided it was time for him to let go, Ethan had to make a choice: fight for what he had left or lose it all. Stay with us to find out what happens when family tries to take everything from you and what happens when you finally fight back. Let's dive in. Ethan hadn't spoken to his father in over 6 weeks when the call came. Not because of any grand fallout, just a quiet, mutual erosion. Phone calls became texts, texts became silence, and silence became the preferred language between them. Ethan was fine with it. Mostly. He stood barefoot in the kitchen of the small but sturdy house his mother left him, watching the snow melt in slanted lines across the window panes. It had been 5 years since her funeral, but some mornings he swore he could still hear her humming through the old floorboards. She had fought for this place, worked 2 jobs, clipped coupons like it was a religion, and still found time to bake banana bread every Sunday. She wasn't perfect, but she never wavered. And when the cancer took her, she left behind a will, a modest 3-bedroom house in suburban New Jersey, and a single, unwavering wish that Ethan would live a life of his own, rooted in something real. That wish had carried him through grief, through long nights and empty holidays. This house wasn't just shelter, it was sanctuary. So when Dan, his father, called and said, "We need to talk in person," Ethan had a gut feeling it wasn't about catching up. Dan's house was a newer build. Gray walls, granite countertops, zero soul. Ethan sat across from him, Karen, Dan's wife, poised at his right, manicured hands folded like she was waiting to lead a PTA meeting. And Brielle, always Brielle. She sat at the head of the table, pregnant and glowing in a way that felt less maternal and more weaponized. The pleasantries were short-lived. "She needs space," Karen said first, her voice dipped in sugar and superiority. "You're living alone in a 3-bedroom. It just makes sense." Ethan blinked. "Are you serious?" Dan shifted uncomfortably. "We looked into a few apartments for you. Nothing fancy, but comfortable." "It's not a request," Brielle added, resting her hands on her stomach like it was a shield. "You're not doing anything meaningful in that house." It was less of a conversation and more of a campaign, a coordinated ambush masked in family concern. Ethan listened, heat rising in his chest, but said nothing. Not yet. They spoke of duty, of family, of how children need stability and how being a single man in a large house was, in Karen's words, a bit indulgent. Every word chipped at the foundation of his piece until Ethan pushed back from the table, eyes locked on his father. "You know what that house meant to Mom," he said quietly. "You know what it means to me." Karen opened her mouth, but Ethan raised a hand. "No, I'm not going to justify living in the only place that ever felt like home." Brielle scoffed. "God, it's just a house." That was the moment he knew. It was never about helping her. It was about taking. He left without another word. Over the next few weeks, Ethan noticed little things. Packages on his porch he hadn't ordered, messages from unknown numbers, a strange woman in a suit taking pictures of his front yard. He told himself it was paranoia, until it wasn't. One night, coming home late from work, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his key, and stopped cold. It didn't fit. The lock had been changed. His chest tightened. Taped to the door was a note. Neat handwriting, polite tone. "For safety reasons, we've had to change the locks. Please contact us to discuss next steps." Signed, Dan and Karen. He stood there for several seconds, unable to move, the cold biting into his skin as the note flapped against the door like a slap. He called his father. No greeting. "What the hell did you do?" Dan's voice was maddeningly calm. "Just temporary. Brielle needed a place to stay. We thought this would be smoother." "You broke into my home." "It's not breaking in," Karen cut in from the background. "It's family business." Ethan didn't yell, he didn't plead. He hung up, called a locksmith, then his lawyer. By midnight, the locks were back to their rightful state. But Ethan knew something deeper had broken. The next morning, in a conference room in downtown Newark, his lawyer leaned back in his chair and said the words Ethan would never forget. "Your father tried to contest the will, months ago." Ethan blinked. What? He didn't file anything official, but he met with a probate attorney, asked if the house could be considered joint marital property or family owned, looking for a loophole. It wasn't Karen's idea. It wasn't even Brielle's. It had been Dan all along. Ethan walked out of that office with every illusion about his father burned to ash. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a betrayal so calculating, so cold, it bordered on criminal. He sat on the porch that night, watching headlights pass by like ghosts on the quiet street. Somewhere inside the house, a floorboard creaked, his mother's ghost maybe, reminding him she'd trusted him for a reason. That he was not alone. He wouldn't be pushed. Not anymore. What would you do if your own family treated your inheritance like a favor they could revoke? How do you protect what's yours when the people betraying you believe they're entitled to it? Because when Ethan changed the locks again, he wasn't just protecting a house, he was preparing for war, and they had no idea what he was about to do next. Ethan didn't sleep that night. The anger had festered in his chest like an open wound. He had always prided himself on being level-headed, practical, and reliable, qualities that were supposed to make him the kind of man who could handle anything. But as the darkness stretched over the city, as the silence of the house pressed down on him, he felt the weight of betrayal like a vice around his chest. The locks were fixed. The door was secure. But his mind was unraveling. He sat up in his mother's old chair, the one that had never been replaced because she'd always liked it, studying the woodwork of the ceiling. The years seemed to drip down from the rafters, those moments with her, when things were simpler. But now, as he sat there in the stillness, he realized that what he was fighting for wasn't just the house. It was a version of his mother that still lived in these walls, still whispered through the furniture, still laughed in the kitchen, still poured tea on chilly afternoons. And Dan, his father, he wasn't a part of that world anymore. The phone call came at 8:13 a.m. The number was unknown. He considered ignoring it, but something in the back of his mind urged him to pick up. Maybe it was the quiet nagging feeling that no matter how hard he tried, the situation wouldn't let go of him. So he pressed answer. "Ethan?" Karen's voice sliced through the line, colder than he remembered. "We need to talk." He stiffened, his grip tightening on the phone. He didn't answer. "You've been difficult," she continued, a false sweetness in her tone. "This has gone too far. You need to realize we're just trying to help Brielle. She's carrying your brother's child, Ethan. You know, the least you could do is support her." Ethan's heart sank. The manipulation was getting worse, more insidious. His mind reeled with the mental image of Karen and Dan behind closed doors, cooking up a new strategy to break him. He could practically hear their whispered conversations, their smug smiles, as they plotted how best to take what didn't belong to them. He gritted his teeth. "I don't owe her anything. I owe my mother. And this house is mine. Not Brielle's, not yours. So if you're calling to ask me to back down again, don't." There was a brief silence on the other end. Then Karen spoke, her tone turning colder still, with an edge of malice creeping in. "You're so selfish. You think your mother's house gives you some kind of moral high ground? You're turning your back on family. You're turning your back on Brielle." His chest tightened. The words stung, sharper than they should have. He knew what she was doing. She was trying to make him feel guilty, trying to wear him down with the same tired rhetoric. But deep down, he wasn't just angry with her, he was angry with himself. Angry that he'd let things go this far. Angry that, somehow, his father and stepmother had chipped away at him so thoroughly that he was questioning his own sense of right and wrong. "I'm not turning my back on anyone," Ethan snapped, his voice strained. "But this is beyond helping anyone. This is about using your daughter's pregnancy as a reason to take what isn't yours." He didn't wait for her to respond before he hung up. The next day, the weight of the situation hit him harder than it ever had. Brielle's pregnancy, her so-called need for the house, wasn't the real issue. The issue was the way they had manipulated him, the way they had twisted his emotions and guilted him into believing that his life wasn't worth the space he occupied. The house wasn't just bricks and wood. It was everything he had left of his mother. As the days wore on, the pressure from his father's side only increased. His dad showed up at the house unannounced, standing on the doorstep with an uncomfortable look on his face. "We need to figure this out, Ethan," he said, his voice strained. "This isn't just about the house. It's about family. You're shutting us out." "Dad," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper, "this is my home. This is where I'm supposed to be, where I have the right to be." Dan's eyes dropped to the ground. He shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't want it to come to this," he muttered, his voice low. "But Brielle, she's having a baby, Ethan. You need to understand. She's scared. She needs stability." "You need to understand something, Dad," Ethan replied, a tremor of emotion he hadn't expected in his voice. "This house isn't just a place to sleep. It's not just bricks. It's everything she left me. It's all I have left of her." His father's gaze faltered, as if he understood for the first time the depth of what Ethan had been holding on to. But before Ethan could say more, his father's phone rang. Dan glanced at the screen, then at Ethan, and without another word, walked off the porch. Ethan didn't know what he expected. Maybe he wanted his father to finally stand up for him. Maybe he wanted him to say something that would make everything right again. But he knew deep down that it wasn't coming. This was the final nail in the coffin. That night, something shifted inside Ethan. The fight wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about standing up for himself, for what his mother had entrusted to him. It was about making sure that no matter what they threw at him, he wouldn't be forced to give in. He realized now that it wasn't just the house they wanted. It was his spirit, his sense of self. He wasn't about to let them take that. But as the days passed, he noticed something new. A new kind of pressure. A subtle shift in the way Brielle was handling the situation. She wasn't being the typical spoiled princess anymore. Instead, she was more insistent, more demanding. And something about her new approach, it felt almost desperate. That was when Ethan found the letter. Hidden in his mailbox, written in Brielle's handwriting, with words that shook him to his core. "Ethan, if you really loved your mother, you would do this for me. You wouldn't let the house become a battleground. It's just a house. But the baby? The baby is forever." What would you do if the very people you loved used your loyalty as a weapon against you? Would you give up your peace for family? Ethan knew now. This wasn't just about his home. It was about his mother's legacy. And he wasn't about to let anyone take that, not even if it meant cutting his ties completely. But as he read Brielle's words, a chilling thought crossed his mind. What if this was just the beginning? What if they were planning something far worse than he could imagine? Ethan sat alone in his mother's old armchair, the place where she used to sit and read him stories when he was a child. The quiet was deafening. The house, once filled with her warmth, now felt like a tomb, each creaking floorboard and gust of wind reminding him of what he had to protect. His fingers tightened around the letter Brielle had left in his mailbox. "If you really loved your mother, you would do this for me. You wouldn't let the house become a battleground. It's just a house. But the baby? The baby is forever." Her words gnawed at him, digging deeper than he cared to admit. He had spent every night since reading that letter, wrestling with the same thought. Was it really worth it? Was it worth standing alone, fighting for something that didn't seem to matter to anyone else? The guilt had gnawed at him too, wrapping around his heart like a tightening chain. Brielle's voice echoed in his ears, the final line burning with a heat that refused to go away. "If you really loved your mother." He couldn't deny it. He did love his mother. He had always loved her. But what she had left behind wasn't just a house, it was his life. The fight wasn't about property. It wasn't about the walls or the roof over his head. It was about everything his mother had instilled in him. Her love, her sacrifices, her determination to build a life worth living. The house was the one thing left to him. And to give it away now would mean losing everything that made him him. But as the days dragged on, things only escalated. Brielle's words twisted in his mind, poisoning every thought, every conversation. She knew exactly what to say to break him. And Ethan found himself at a crossroads. What was he really fighting for? The answer came late one evening. There was a knock on the door. He wasn't expecting anyone. Not anymore. He hesitated but stood, making his way toward the door. He checked the security cameras. Nothing unusual. When he opened the door, there they were. Brielle, her baby in her arms, her face a perfect mask of innocence and helplessness. Dan stood just behind her, his posture awkward, eyes darting, as if he wasn't sure what to say. Ethan's heart thudded painfully in his chest. He had no idea what they wanted this time, but he had a feeling it wasn't going to be pretty. "Ethan," Dan began, his voice low, as if he was already trying to soften the blow. "We've been thinking about everything, about how this situation has gone on too long. And Brielle, well, she's trying to do what's best for her baby. This isn't just about the house. It's about family, son." Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat, his gaze fixed on his father. "You didn't think about family when you and Karen tried to steal it from me, did you?" The words felt bitter in his mouth, but they needed to be said. Dan's eyes flickered with something that might have been guilt, but he quickly masked it with frustration. "You don't understand, Ethan. It's not about stealing anything. It's about stability for Brielle. She's pregnant. She needs a place to raise her child. And this house could give her that. Your mother would have understood that." Ethan felt his stomach churn. His father had the audacity to invoke his mother's name now, as though he hadn't already trampled all over her memory with his actions. "My mother's house isn't just a roof," Ethan said, his voice growing louder, more forceful. "It's a part of who she was, who I am. She left it to me for a reason. I won't give it up to you, to her, or to anyone. You can't just take what isn't yours and claim it's for family's sake." Brielle's voice cut through the conversation like a sharp knife. "You don't get it, Ethan. This is about me, about us. You're so wrapped up in your pride and your stupid memories that you can't see what's best for everyone else. I'm the one who's pregnant. I'm the one who needs security. You're just a man, alone. What do you need with all that space? I need it more than you." Ethan's jaw clenched. His hands shook as he fought to maintain control. "You need it more than me? You don't need my home. You need to figure out your own life. My mom left this to me. I have every right to be here." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Brielle looked down at the baby in her arms, and for a moment, Ethan almost thought he saw something shift in her, something human, something vulnerable. But it passed too quickly. "This is it, Ethan," she said softly. "This is the last time I'm asking. Don't make me beg. Don't make me choose between my baby and you." A deep, aching silence fell over the house. Ethan's heart thundered in his chest, but now, more than ever, he knew what he had to do. His hands balled into fists, the weight of their demand pressing down on him. "You've already made your choice, Brielle," Ethan replied, his voice steady, but beneath it, the ache of loss. "And I've made mine. This is my home, not yours, not anyone else's." Dan and Brielle stood there for a long moment, neither of them speaking. The tension was thick, suffocating. Then, without a word, Dan turned and walked away. Brielle lingered for a moment, her eyes searching Ethan's face, trying to find a crack, a weakness. But there was nothing. She walked away too, leaving him standing there on the porch. Ethan stood in the silence for what felt like an eternity, the door still open. He didn't feel victorious. He didn't feel like a man who had won. All he felt was an emptiness that echoed through the walls of the house. The house was still his, but at what cost? That night, as he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the truth settled in. He had won the battle, but at the cost of his family. His father, The man who had once meant the world to him was now just a ghost in the past. Brielle, the sister he had never asked for, was now a stranger to him, and yet the house was still his. The next morning he received a letter. It was from his father, and as he opened it, Ethan's eyes scanned the words that were written. "I tried, but I failed. I've let you down, Ethan. I'm sorry." Ethan sat there, the weight of those words heavier than he had expected. He had always wanted an apology, wanted his father to admit what he'd done wrong. But now that it was here, it felt empty, hollow, like a door that had been opened but never truly shut. He sighed and looked around the room. This was his home, the place his mother had built, and no matter how empty it felt now, he knew it was his to keep. But would it ever be enough? What do you think? Was Ethan right to protect what was left of his mother's legacy, or should he have given in for the sake of family? 100 if you think Ethan did the right thing. Where are you watching from? Share this video with your friends, and thank you for watching Life Stories.